page. Okay, we are live.
Thank you, Olivia, for noting in the chat or in the Q&A that we're running a little late. Just give people a few more minutes here and then we'll get started.
Amy Rig. Is there a fridge?
There is not,
It's not, okay.
sadly.
It's not,
Jamie's actually sitting here.
okay.
If she needs a mic, you're sitting here.
Oh, over there.
And we're live, but we're waiting for a few people. Jamie is stuck in traffic.
Okay.
Michaela, we do have quorum now, so I'm going to suggest we go ahead and get started and hope that Jamie beats traffic soon.
Hey, great. All right. Well, with that, I call this meeting to order of the Seattle Planning Commission on June 8th, 2023. I will begin with a land acknowledgement. On behalf of the Seattle Planning Commission, we'd like to actively recognize that we are on Indigenous land, the traditional and current territories of the Coast Salish people who have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We acknowledge the role that traditional Western-centric planning practices have played in harming, displacing, and attempting to erase Native communities. And we commit to identifying racist practices and strive to center restorative land stewardship rather than unsustainable and extractive use of the land. I think we do have a member of the public on the call today. And do we have anybody in the room, Vanessa?
We do not have anybody other than commissioners and staff.
Okay. Well, welcome. If there are any members of the public listening, we welcome you. We're happy to make all of our meetings open to the public. Just want to note that our Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since we are an advisory body. In that capacity, we provide recommendations to elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions. And we encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting where you can obviously see that some individuals are participating remotely while others are participating in person at the Boards and Commissions room at Seattle City Hall. In advance of today's meeting, I just want us all to take a moment to look at and reflect on the color brave space norms that are on the screen. I am supposed to be implementing a new practice this meeting that I forgot to do in advance, so my apologies. So nobody is actually prepared to speak to one of these today. So I just encourage you to take a second to look at these, suggest any amendments if there are any, and be ready to put these into practice throughout our meeting today. All right. Seeing as there's no amendments, we can move on. Are we doing public comment or are we doing agenda review? I think we're. Sorry, sorry, I'm a little lost with the slide in my speaker notes. I'll go over our agenda items. So we have 2 agenda items for today. We have a case study of community-based engagement around the upcoming major update to the comprehensive plan, and an introduction to the Office of Planning and Community Development's first Indigenous planning strategist, Tim Lehman. For our first item of business today, we need to approve the May 25th, 2023 meeting minutes. Vanessa, we do indeed have quorum.
We do.
All right. May I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
David will so move.
Moved by
Julio
David.
Sanchez seconds.
All right, and seconded by Julio. Are there any changes or amendments? If not, let's take a vote to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Say nay. Any abstentions? Minutes are approved. The chair's report is the first agenda item here. We have our next committee meeting is the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting on Thursday, June 15th from 7:30 to 9 a.m. The meeting will be held online only using the MS Teams platform. And our next full agenda or full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 22nd from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And that meeting will be hybrid, held both in person and via MS Teams. Vanessa, do you have any announcements to provide?
Sure. Thank you, Michaela. I just wanted to note, as you noted, this is a hybrid meeting. We have a few commissioners here in the boards and commissions room, and the rest of the planning commissioners are joining remotely. During the meeting, there will be opportunities for questions and comments from commissioners. And I would just like to ask all commissioners, including those who are here in the boards and commissions room, to use the chat function to be recognized to speak. I will help monitor the chat and support Michaela in calling on people in order. And just a reminder that the chat function is not for substantive discussion, but rather to be recognized to speak. I will read any public comment emailed to me prior to this meeting, and I've not received any, so I do not have public comment either right now or at the conclusion of the meeting. We have started taking public comment both at the beginning and the ends of our meetings, although we don't have any public comment today unless somebody joins us in the audience. And with that, I'll ask Michaela to start the introductions. After you've introduced yourself, please call on another commissioner and then we'll conclude with staff.
All right, good afternoon. Michaela Dappern, I'm co-chair of the commission. I live in Capitol Hill. I use she, her pronouns, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. Dalton.
Sorry, trying to find the mute button, but hey everyone, my name is Dalton Owens. I live in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle. I work in construction as a project engineer and pronouns he, him. And then I'll pass it off to Lauren.
Hey everyone, Lauren Squires, she, her. I live in Mount Baker. And I'm a transportation planner at Nelson Nygaard. Rose.
Hey, Rose Luchello, pronouns they, them. I live up north in Licton Springs, so I'm saying hello from my parents' place in California. And then for work, I'm a wetland biologist and permitting specialist at Jacobs Engineering. I will pass it to Julio.
Hello, my name is Julio Sanchez. My pronouns are he, him. When in Seattle, I reside in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. And I really can't see the list of people, so please, if you haven't introduced yourself, be the next one.
I can go. David Goldberg, he, him pronouns. I'm the other co-chair of the commission. I live in the Wallingford Urban Village and work for the State Department of Transportation. And see, very slow to get the list up here. Yeah, Rick's over there. Rick hasn't gone.
Sure. Greetings all. I'm Rick Moeller, use he, him pronouns. Live between Wallingford and Green Lake. I'm an architect and on the faculty at the University of Washington. And Jamie.
Hi everyone, Jamie Strobel, she, her pronouns, and I live in the future 130th station area, and I work in climate change and environmental justice. Caleb.
Hi everyone, my name is Caleb Flode, he, him pronouns. I live in Columbia City and I work in education at Rainier Scholars, and I'll pass it up to Deanna.
Hello, I'm Deanna Quintanar. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill and I'm a multimodal transportation planner at WSP. And I will pass it over to staff, I believe, at this point.
I'll jump in. Hi everyone, Olivia Baker, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the planning commission. John.
Hi everyone, I'm John Hoy, staff to the Planning Commission. I use he, him pronouns. Vanessa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I'm staff to the commission. I use she, her pronouns. And I would like to note that Commissioner Matt Hutchins, who resides in West Seattle and is an architect, is joining us on the call. However, he doesn't have the interface to be able to introduce himself. So I'm doing it for him. And with that, I'll turn it back to Michaela.
All right, well, that moves us on to our first main agenda item, which is the case study on the community-based comprehensive plan engagement. Commissioner Jamie Strobel will walk us through the public engagement work she undertook in partnership with the Khmer community of Seattle King County. Following her presentation, I'll facilitate our discussion by first asking commissioners for any clarifying questions. If you don't have a question, feel free to pass and I'll circle back to you at the end of the questions portion. Following questions, we'll open the floor to comments. Vanessa will assist in monitoring the queue and ensuring all commissioners have the opportunity to participate in the discussion. We have 55 minutes for that agenda item. And with that, Jamie, I'll invite you to take it over.
I have to put up your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to invite Kim, you to join me. You want to bring a chair? Yeah. We'll scooch over. So we're very fortunate to be joined by Stephanie Ung, who is on the call virtually with you all, who's the co-executive director of the Khmer community of Seattle King County. And then Kim Yu, who's right next to me, who was one of the other folks that was supporting this project with me. And as you all have heard from Aja and Michael and staff from OPCD, as well as staff from SDOT, there were several grants that went out to support community-based organizations in engaging on the comp plan and on the Seattle Transportation Plan. And since this was a presentation we did at the community report back in February, we thought since we're all kind of gearing up to review the comp plan, that it might be a nice time for you all just to get a little snapshot of how impactful those grants were for different communities. And obviously, this is just one of many organizations that were funded who all were doing pretty phenomenal, amazing work. So by no means do I want to like say that any of them are better than another. This is really, we really just wanted to kind of show as a case study the potential of the city being able to do this work. And so I know the commission really advocated for increasing the community engagement budget and being able to allow support OPCD and SDOT and being able to do this a little bit differently and have communities that have not really traditionally had access to easy access to public process or understanding something as kind of obtuse as the comprehensive plan. And so we just want to talk a bit about how we went about this and how we made this accessible, and the experiences of the elder and the youth. And we'll mostly just talk about that. And Stephanie is also going to be sharing some of her insights about what this meant to her community and to KCSKC. So this is our cover image. Do you want to introduce yourself at all?
Sure.
Sorry, I should have.
You're good. It's like exciting stuff is talking about that. Hi, all. My name is Kim. I am a public health researcher, as well as a person who likes to do research with regard to community engagement, specifically community-based participatory research. So yeah, this was a really exciting project for me to be a part of, and really be a part of this implementation of this project and support and expand the capacity for what KCSKC is able to do and how they can engage with the city. So please.
Stephanie, do you want to introduce yourself too? This will be a good
Sure.
test to see if our technology is working.
Great. Chumnipsu Netahaknia, Yum Chua Stephanie, Kyum Tokano Sahakam Kmai, Pacham Seattle King County. Hi, Julio. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Ung. I'm the co-executive director for Khmer Community of Seattle King County. Any pronouns are good. I'm coming to you all. I wish I could be there in person. I'm at our temporary space that we occupy, or that we not occupy, that we currently operate from in Apsara Palace in White Center, unincorporated King County. Our community was displaced from our location where we've been since the 80s in late 2019, and we've been operating without a place since then. Grew a lot during COVID. Without a space, we used a lot of community leaders' homes and basements for programming, storage of PPE, etc. And we have 2 vans, 2 15 passengers that are the assets of our community. It helps us meet our community where they're at. So we're very mobile because we don't have a space. So displacement, issues of displacement and planning, all of that is super important to our community. We are on the way to opening the first Khmer Community Center in Washington State. We're still in the acquisition phase, still looking for that spot, but it's definitely one of the priorities for KCSKC. And very proud and humbled to be able to partner with Jamie and Kim on this project. I hope that you all will enjoy the presentation, ask lots of questions, and I can go on and on about the impact that this project has had on our elders and young people. So questions are great to help me, narrow that focus, but I'll pass it back to Jamie. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. So a lot of this engagement happened last summer into like fall. I think our last one was in kind of October-ish. And this was a process about a year. We spent about a year on this, kind of developing out curriculum and a plan. And we primarily worked with the elders and then the youth, and we came up with kind of separate curriculum tracks, but we also had youth who came on the elder trip. So it was very intergenerational. This picture is from an elder field trip we did where we took folks on the water taxi into downtown Seattle and walked in the waterfront area, and came back. For a lot of the trips we did, this was the first time elders had ever been in these areas of Seattle at all. So next slide, please. Who's managing? So what did we do? We knew that approaching community members with kind of like, tell us what you think about the comp plan was probably not going to go over well. And so we really wanted to frame this around experiences and talk about the issues after they had a chance to kind of see things firsthand and then apply that to their own communities, neighborhoods and places that they go. So we did, for the elders, we did 4 field trips all across the city, and we'll walk through each of those and maybe we can trade off on them.
Yeah.
And for some of our elders, it was their first time riding public transit. It was something that was really intimidating for folks if you were limited mobility or English isn't your first language and you might not even know any English. It's just kind of scary to go around the city. And so this was kind of a way to make it really accessible for folks and fun. And we got to see new places. We also did several youth workshops with KCSKC's garden program. They run an amazing garden program that Stephanie, I don't know how she does it all, but she runs all of the garden programming while also being an executive director and also supporting all the elder programs. And then we did 2 workshops with the dance group. So Kamai Amarok is their youth dance program that operates out of the Rainier Arts Center in Columbia City. And they do all kinds of traditional Kamai dance, which is incredible if you have an opportunity to go see them perform. And so we did workshops with them. And for each of these, we kind of tailored it to the interests of the youth. You know, the ones at the garden were really about like food and food systems, food justice, walkable communities. The garden we did this out of was in High Point. So we walked around High Point, and we'll talk more about that as we go through, but I digress. So we also did a celebration event at the end of all of the workshops and field trips, and kind of made sure that we were like checking back in with community and saying what we heard, does this resonate? Did we capture this correctly? Getting more feedback on that. And then we did our final report back in February, where we took everything. Kim and I did a lot of collating and took all of the things we heard from the community and turned them into recommendations and policy recommendations and mapped it out to the comp plan and all of the potential topics within the comp plan. So it's a big undertaking over the last year. Next slide, please. So we'll walk through each of the field trips just to give you a taste of kind of what we heard, what the experiences were like for the elders, and what we talked about. I'll pass to Kim.
Sure. So we try to design our 4 elder field trips around touching upon various types of transportation, so they had that experience. And the first one was to take the bus and the monorail to Seattle Center. So we took the bus starting from where Stephanie is right now, in White Center, yeah, from Opsida Palace, all the way to downtown Westlake, and then took the monorail from there to Seattle Center. And yeah, this was our first trip together to go downtown. It was really interesting to have folks reflect on their experiences going downtown, specifically to Seattle Center, and really like a lot of things for them to do. They even the elder staff was really surprised by the elders' desire to take the stairs in certain situations because everybody was so amped and excited about it. Yeah, that was really a wonderful experience. But this was our first time with us, and we had Aja and other folks from OPCD join us, as well as SDOT. So that was a really great opportunity for them to like put a face to the folks who were a part of the program.
I think 2 things to note here that are interesting is, one, for a lot of elders, they had this preconceived notion of what downtown was based on the news. So if you watch the news a lot, they're like, this is a scary place. There's lots of crime. They were afraid to go down to downtown. And after our trip, they're like, oh, this isn't that bad. And they were worried about their granddaughter who was working in retail or working in downtown. And they're like, oh, I'm less worried now. So that perception of how different places of the city are portrayed in media too had like a big impact in their mobility. The other thing to note in this one is on the top right photo was when we had city staff come and meet with us. And when we asked them, like, tell the city staff what you think, they're like, thank you so much for making this field trip possible. And like, no feedback, didn't want to say anything negative. And the reason I mention this is because you'll kind of see an arc over the 4 field trips of slowly kind of building trust to be able to provide like real feedback. Because I think at this point there was fear, right? Especially when you think about the relationships of the Khmer community with government in particular, that, not wanting to seem ungrateful for the opportunity to do this, and not wanting to say anything negative potentially. So that initial feedback session, we didn't get a whole lot of information directly, but it was powerful. Stephanie, do you want to add anything about this one?
I think this one, no, I think there was excitement among the elders. The elder in the top left who's got the really enthusiastic peace sign, he has a lot of experience taking the bus, so he had an opportunity to show and demonstrate his knowledge to his peers. So that was really exciting because he got to show everyone how to tap on, tap off with the Orca card. And for a lot of in general, how KCSKC approaches our work with elders is that every experience that we provide them or with how we serve them is just to make sure that they're better off. And for many of them, even though they've been here since the 80s as refugees from the Khmer Rouge, many of them have never been to these places, even though they lived in Seattle for the last 40 years. So that was also a special element of this, was not only taking the bus for the first time or the monorail, but getting and going to new places, but getting to do that as a group with their peers. And it just, just like teens like to hang out with their friends, or we like to go out in big groups with our families, or a big group of friends. The elders are no different. Yeah.
Now I'm remembering this picture on the bottom right there was someone in a wheelchair also waiting at the bus stop. And when the bus came, it lowered the ramp, and a bunch of the elders were like, there's a ramp? Like, they had no idea that this was even a thing with the bus, and that was, so it's again, like, do those messages reach the communities that could utilize those resources? So it was a good moment. Yeah. Next slide. Okay. So then we decided on the next one to take the light rail this time. We went from Tukwila all the way up to the International District. And for this one, we really wanted to see another neighborhood that was a community of color that had experienced displacement and kind of community activism. And a lot of the Khmer community has experienced displacement from the city of Seattle and from White Center. And so we wanted to go and learn about the activism that had happened in the CID. And so we did a field trip up there. We walked through Canton Alley. They learned about Uncle Bob and Donnie Chin and the legacy of different leaders in the CID. We also somehow seem to always pick the days that there were heat waves. It was not what we had planned, but somehow it always coincided with a really hot day, and trying to find places that were cool for the elders to rest, places to sit that were shaded, finding places that were air conditioned, were like, this was difficult. As well as places they could use the bathroom. We had to like work out a deal with like people we knew in the neighborhood to like be able to use their conference room, and that was air conditioned so they could eat in a place without having heat stroke. But it was also like another added challenge of being able to navigate the city, especially as an older person. Anything Stephanie or Kim, you want to add to about this one?
No,
All right,
no.
next slide.
This was another hot day. For the third field trip, we took the water taxi from that first photo on the first slide. And even just waiting for the water taxi, it was a hard time finding shady locations, trying to find a space for us to eat that was outdoors because, you know, COVID is a concern for especially our elders. Was really challenging to find shade, and that entire walkway, I think along there, they all noted sort of, I wonder why there's no trees. One thing about this trip that was, I think really, like most of the elders didn't even realize that this water taxi was something that they could bus to from where they were. And I think a lot of them hadn't taken it before. In fact, I think that was the first time I took it as well. You can just see here that they had a great time despite the heat. And we did our best to find ways to creatively find them space, but they had a lot of really interesting ideas around like what could be adjusted and changed. And I know some of them are already in the works along the Seattle waterfront, but they were like, yeah, let's get some trees in here and like provide some
Places to
to
sit that are
Yeah.
in the shade.
Yeah.
And we also, like the top right picture was where we actually had to buy all the elders ice cream so that they could sit inside somewhere because it's a private space, right? And so that they could use the bathroom. And so the elders were always like, do I always have to buy something to find a bathroom? And it was definitely like with elders, that was always the first question was like, where's the next bathroom? And so navigating the city was a lot of extra planning around those things that we would necessarily have to do with youth or with younger adults. So Stephanie, anything you want to add on this one?
I think just since we're on field trip number 3, I think something, Jamie, maybe you could share a little bit about like themes that we were hearing consistently about like people experiencing homelessness or just their perceptions of what this part of the city meant. But I remember during this field trip, like a lot of the elders they were just like floored by how beautiful where they lived, you know, the city that they live in. But they don't get to experience it all the time. They kind of just stay in their neighborhood. And so I know there was a lot of gratitude after this field trip too, because it was the third one. We bought them ice cream and cold water. And this was really, I think, when we started to build that trust with the elders and they started to understand what we were trying to get at with this project.
Yeah. Yeah, the different theme in each of these field trips, we were focused on like different themes. Obviously, transportation was a big theme through all of this because KCSKC got granted both the SDOT community engagement and the OPCD community engagement money. So we were trying to cover all the topics, hence why all the field trips involved public transit mostly, and different forms of public transit. But there were definitely some, comments about concerns around homelessness, concerns around, how do you stay like cool in the heat? How do you, these places, like, can anybody go here? Certain areas of the city just kind of feeling inaccessible, like they don't belong to them too. That's for certain communities or certain like wealthier communities, which actually ties in well into the next slide. Our last field trip with the elders was probably one of the most powerful. We started in Woodland Park at the Rose Garden next to the zoo. And this was our first field trip up into North Seattle. Most of the elders are in South Seattle, Southeast Seattle, White Center, and then some that are dispersed all over the place, but their kind of cultural connections are in Seattle. And a lot of folks had never been to these places. So to or even traveled that far north, I think. Yeah. And we wanted to show them, our focus on this one was really around parks and open space. And so we took them to Green Lake, the Rose Garden. A lot of the elders were like, wow, like this is super nice. I didn't know this existed. And we talked pretty frankly about the history of some of these places. So the Rose Garden was, you know, formerly indigenous land that had been taken up by white settlers. And then it was a very wealthy white family that ended up donating it to the city to become a park. And so we talked a bit about like the legacy of land that was stolen and then donated, and where a lot of the parks are in the city, especially ones that are like, this one's very carefully curated. It's very beautiful. And so one of the elders turned to us and they said, so this is stolen land then? And they were very perceptive. And we also went to Green Lake and set up some blankets and like walked around and talked about, and there's a lot of comments of how come we don't have parks like this near where we live, and you know how hard it is to get up there. This was one where we actually did take the vans, because if we had taken public transit, it would have taken us like 2 hours to get up there. And so it was also a time when we had some really real conversations about housing and where we live, and the experiences of the elders of displacement, and some, you know, one had shared about how they had run a business, and then when they lost the business, like experiencing homelessness and that instability. And this was, you know, I think the moment where elders were finally like, oh, you're actually asking us what we think. Like you really truly want to hear. And I think often, you know, with communities at the beginning, the elders were like, I'm okay. When we asked them, what else would you want to see? What's the vision? What do you want? And they were like, I'm okay. Like I have a place to live. I can get food. Like I'm fine. Like there's this fear of asking for too much, or even dreaming, being able to dream about something, which is like often, you know, we've both of us having immigrant parents, I think we all kind of relate to some of that feeling of like, are we allowed to even dream about this? And one of the things that we talked about with the city staff afterwards was that so much of this exercise was about building trust. And so, and knowing that for some communities who have experienced, you know, harm from a relationship with government, or they come from a place where the relationship with government was problematic or threatening, or that it takes extra time, and that the city needs to invest in that trust building to be able to get to a place for folks to actually open up. Like if we just hold that one first field trip, you would think everything's fine and they have no opinions on how things could be better. It took till our fourth one to get to a place of like trust and really being able to hear what elders wanted to see.
Yeah, I think of note, this was the trip where they really started visioning beyond just responding to what they were seeing, and visioning what their neighborhood, or what we realized the term we should have been using is village.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
With them, that really clicked for some, you know, for them. And so I think this is when we actually were able to have, and I think the timing worked out well, or the arc of it worked out well, to sort of land in our final location in this like very green, comfortable, beautiful space, where like a lot of these folks have agricultural background or come from that background. And so everywhere we went, they were like, we could grow things to eat here. Like you can eat that, you can make this into food. And like even at the bus stop, there's just like a planter, and they would talk about that. And I think that was just like, so the way that they were seeing their environment was we loved like hearing them say that and really helping us even think about our space around us a little bit differently. And I think that was something that I gained from working with elders in this. And I think like that sort of arc was really took time, and we were able to work with the elder staff who were our primary folks who were translating for us or interpreting for us. And so, you know, they mentioned to us that this was where people started saying like, oh, I finally feel like I'm a part of like American society, like that I am here like as a citizen participating. And I think it took time, right? Like a lot of the things they reported back to us were maybe a few weeks after an event had happened, and they'd say like, oh, our elders have been telling us this or have been talking about that. And it's just not something that you can just be like, hey, okay, we saw that thing, now what do you think? You need sort of that marination time, you know, some of that digestion time. Yeah.
Stephanie?
I think y'all really covered it. I do think like something that there are assumptions about refugees and immigrants who come to the US who don't know about Native peoples or whose land this was before it was colonized. And I think it was really affirming to hear, like, because of our elders' lived experience in Sok Mai in Cambodia, they have a lot more empathy and can relate more to the Indigenous people here in the United States in regards to like being displaced from their own lands. And because in Cambodia, you know, in the 8th century, the Kingdom of Cambodia was so huge. And so there's a long history in Sok Mai of just, you know, talking about land and like that being really fluid. So our elders, I think, really resonated with that. And I do also think that this field trip, I mean, I think they walked around Green Lake one time, like all of them. They were just so excited. You know, some people, I know some elders have like forgotten their cane because they're just so excited and don't feel the pain. And again, I think just all of these field trips are really just, we wanted to make sure that no matter what feedback we got to take away and take back to the city, that no matter what, our elders would have had an experience to remember, and that we weren't going to let like this opportunity be just extractive, and that we wanted to make sure that they, no matter what, got something out of it. And it's so sweet to see these photos because I see these elders like twice every week now, because this really snowballed into, you know, the elders feeling like in the habit of seeing each other and like, yeah, we are a community, and that's really been missing since resettling in Seattle. So really beautiful. Some of them have asked about Green Lake since then. As the weather gets better, they're like, oh, where are we gonna go next? So it's really just opening up what's possible. And enriches our programming because now our elders are able to draw from past experiences to give ideas for what they want to do next. And that we're always really happy to respond to that.
This next slide, please. So we'll talk a bit about the youth ones. I'm keeping an eye on the clock too. We're spending most of our time just talking about the process and what we got out of this, and so we won't really spend a whole lot of time on like the recommendations that came out of it. So this, for the youth garden workshops, this one we really wanted to focus the first ones on like a place where they are. So this was, we went to the High Point Pea Patch first, where the garden program does a lot of their work. We did a walking tour where they got to split up into groups and kind of do a neighborhood observation. We talked about permeable pavement and green stormwater infrastructure. We talked about the area where in High Point at the edge, you can see like one side of the street has street trees and sidewalks, and then right across the street, there's no sidewalks and no street trees. So we talked a bit about the built environment, and we talked about housing and different types of housing. We're on this field trip walking through and we run into like a neighbor they know, and we're just all of a sudden we're talking to the neighbor, and And it was a good experience for folks to learn. We also we taught them how to read graphs. I remember.
That's right.
We gave them little graphs to read and they had to interpret them.
Yeah.
And that this was really the structure for our youth ones is we really were going to them first. And then the second one, we wanted to take them to show them a different place that was similar to a place where they do their work. So we went to the Danny Wu Community Garden in the Chinatown International District and took folks to that to learn about another community garden and how they were growing culturally relevant vegetables and the history that went behind that place existing in the first place. They also got to learn a lot of similar things that the elders got to learn on that trip. And learned about the history that middle photo is around in Nihon Machi in Japantown, of learning about internment and the impacts to different communities of color in Seattle and to place. And so they got to draw a lot of different connections to food systems, to neighborhoods, to walkable communities, and talking about all those different topics.
Yeah, and then we took them to boba afterwards to talk.
Oh yeah, we took them to boba after.
so that we could sit and like chat about. Yeah.
When working with youth, take them to boba.
Yeah, nobody's upset about that.
Stephanie, anything to add on this one?
I think no. I think you all summarized it nicely.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, so with the dance youth, we did 2 workshops as well. The first day was at Rainier Art Center, where they usually do their Khmer Amarak practices. So we had an opportunity actually to just walk around Columbia City and the neighborhood around there to talk through and have them observe what they were seeing in that area, specifically around what cultural and art like institutions or other organizations or businesses were available and around, as well as transportation, how it felt to have Rainier Avenue running through that area. And a lot of them had sort of some thoughts about what it felt like to cross the street there and things like that. And then the next workshop.
We need them to do a scavenger hunt.
That's right. Like a photo scavenger hunt. We looked for like community gardens as well there. And then we went to the Union Cultural Center, which was lovely. We had an opportunity to see another cultural center engage in other folks' cultures and art and music. Specifically, you can see a photo of that. And so I don't know the name of that instrument.
I forget the name of the instrument, but this is a capoeira studio. And so they also do kind of capoeiras, like martial arts and dance sort of, and music all combined. And so they did kind of a cross-cultural exchange to share, like, this is what we do in our dance program and the instruments we use. And they got to learn about that. And we learned a lot. We went there to really focus on like art space specifically, and how Union Cultural Center had gone through a lot of struggle to kind of like find their own actual physical space and then to like be a part of a community. So a lot of the themes in this one was around art space and affordable art space, displacement of the arts community from Seattle. KCSKC rents at Rainier Art Center, and there's a bigger dream to have their own art space. And so we talked a lot about the role of arts in our city. Stephanie, anything on this one?
I think what I know from this experience is that this really inspired our young people to dream about what they would want our community center to look like. For our youth, it's been really different to explore that kind of dreaming than it has with the elders. And I think that this workshop really put them like in the driver's seat and give them like tangible things to draw from, to decide what they like and don't like, what they'd like to see in a future community center or not. And I think for both our elders and youth, that process is invaluable to be doing right now, even though we don't have a space, because it's kind of like that skill building and preparing them for when we do, because we are going to have one. When we do, they'll already have been in the practice of thinking about what is it that they want to see, how to find inspiration in what exists rather than jealousy or like feeling bummed that they don't have it. So I think whether it was elders or youth, just getting to expose them to new places and then have a facilitated discussion by Kim and Jamie in the context of engaging with the city that they live in. I think that will be really meaningful, to come, just for how they'll be able to engage when it's our turn.
Next slide. So we're gonna skip through a lot of these very quickly because we want to get to the end and just talk about, have Stephanie reflect a bit too on what it was like to have the city support something like this. So we'll just talk through kind of the high level themes that came out from a lot of their discussions. Obviously, we talked a lot about displacement and housing instability. We talked about getting access to housing resources. Next. We talked about disparities in development, access to green space near where you live. Next slide. Oh, I love the quotes. Maybe we should pause on the quotes. Do you want to read it?
Sure. This is one of our community voices. I think this is specifically from a youth. They mentioned that transportation is essential for my community. Many have been displaced far from where cultural hubs are, meaning that they have to travel farther to find community. Much of my family lives out in suburbia, so transportation is a must. We all use cars. When going to UW, public transportation was great, but as I moved away, that access went away too. The bus routes near my house are few and far between. I would love investment in more bus routes and train stations that don't disturb the community.
Next slide. Transportation, we had a lot around transportation because we caught public transit in so many of these field trips. A lot had to do with language access, mobility, the fact that in the quote, for example, how we had so many folks who are dependent on cars because they've been displaced, and so access to public transit becoming more challenging. Next slide. Also, public safety came up quite a bit throughout all of the conversations. Lighting, sidewalks, safe crossings. Next slide. Fair enforcement came up as well, and like definitely feelings around fear on light rail. There's some, can be triggering experiences of folks who are considered, police or law enforcement on a train, and it being kind of triggering for communities where law enforcement, when you've experienced authoritarian government, it's a triggering thing. And so they were like, are there other ways that we could address fair enforcement? They love the fact that like them getting to travel as a group was a way for them to like very comfortably and safely experience public transit for the first time and learn how to use it so that they could build their comfort in a safe space so that then they could later perhaps do it on their own. Next slide. Lots around green space and open space. Again, Kim said a lot of folks came from agricultural backgrounds, so they love the flowers, they love the plants. They're always like, can we eat that?
Yeah, they're like, oh, this is something you can make into this thing. I was like, sure, yeah.
Next to like plants next to bus stops, plants in parks, plants in medians, plants in always.
That's great.
Yeah. Next slide.
Edible environment.
Edible environment, yeah. Healthy and connected communities came up a lot, or like building social cohesion, supporting gathering space, affordable gathering space, public bathrooms, of course, came up a lot. Next slide. Arts and culture definitely came up a lot. We talked a bit about arts displacement, and Stephanie talked about how KCSKC had actually been displaced from their kind of hub as well, and the definite need for that space so that youth and elders can kind of have these public spaces that are inclusive, accessible, and culturally relevant. Next slide. Displacement. We made a whole slide just for displacement, even though it wasn't a comp plan area. because it just came up so much. And so we really wanted to make sure that that got highlighted on its own.
Yeah.
Next slide. Climate change. This is a picture when we had we were by the water taxi and we were coming back in the afternoon to take the water taxi back over. And we came over and there's like one bench that fits like 6 people. And all the spots were already occupied. And we roll up with like 15 elders plus all the staff. There's nowhere for them to sit. And the line to go to the ferry is in direct sun. And so we all decided to wait in the lobby area and not go into the area. And the ferry workers came over to us and they're like, you need to get in line. You can't just hang out in this area. And I was like, absolutely not. We're not going to go stand in the direct sun with a bunch of elders in this spot. And they ended up moving the line over for us, a couple of lanes over where it was in the shade. But like that, having like heat adapted approaches to infrastructure like that, it was just like, it wasn't a thought till we brought it up saying it's actually a health hazard for them to stand in line in the heat. And there was no place to sit. So then they were like, when we got in line, they all sat on the ground. But this was a picture of like that day that was just, yeah, it was hard to find shade. And I'm so thankful we didn't have any heat stroke because it was dicey. It was up to 90, I think, that day, at least over 90. Yeah.
This was also one of our trips in the last bullet. It talks about improving water and air quality. I think a lot of times communities of color, when we think about talking about climate change, they're not really top of mind of folks who think that that's a high priority. But actually, when we walked around with these elders, they were like, what's up with the water quality downtown? It's like, shouldn't this be cleaner? Like, are the fish safe to eat from here, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that was just something that like, we're just clearly not listening to them in the right context, I think. Yeah.
Next slide. Stephanie, feel free to jump in on any of these because we're just trying to move quickly for time. But if you want to add, just come off mute and interrupt us.
I think I was waiting to talk about this, so you can go first.
Yeah, this one, go ahead. Why don't you do this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think what I've learned in my time as co-executive director of KCSKC is that it's not about like what we as leaders or liaisons learn in order to improve and train up like our government to be better. And it's more about how do we foster a better relationship with each other? Because I think that as much as we have all these takeaways and things that we want to share back with our decision makers, ultimately what's been the most important and one of the biggest benefits and what we think is most meaningful for the KCSKC is the opportunity for our staff who are all Khmer, whether we're an intergenerational staff. So we have young people, at the time we had young people as young as 18 on staff, and then our oldest staff is like in their 50s. And this project has been a gift for us to experience building relationships with our community in a very meaningful way that is around a bigger purpose. It's not just like hanging out together, but it's how do we find healing and empowerment in this whole process. And that has been instrumental because we've built this investment from our government into KCSKC to take elders on these field trips and youth on these field trips allows us to show up for our community in a very meaningful way. And that's been, invaluable. And I do know that for our elders and youth, they have expressed so much gratitude for this experience because no one has ever taken the time to engage with them this meaningfully, right? To like plan out where the bathrooms, make sure there's like appropriate food for them to eat, thinking about like even language access, like Jamie and Kim prepared all these questions, and then we had interpreters who they have relationship with and who they could trust and talk to. And that isn't something that we can train up or like would ever expect our government or any city officials to be fully, able to do just themselves, because we don't want to replace KCSKC or replace community-based orgs. We just want to enhance the relationship that we can have with our government and with the decision makers, because it's like we're all needed, and that's been, one of the biggest things in this. And then I think the second thing is having the expertise of our community consultants. Kim and Jamie have certain skill sets that folks in our community don't have because of various reasons, and that it's not just about it's not just about them having been outsiders, but more like they really immersed themselves in community, learned how to greet elders saw them consistently, and that made it so that they could turn all of the stories they were hearing into very tangible policy speak. Not all, like, I would say, like, the capacity of our organization to be able to turn our stories into something that can move data or like move people who are really numbers oriented. Like sometimes we don't have we just know what we know. We just know what we've lived. We just know what our community is about, and need the expertise from other folks, the other perspectives, to turn that into something really powerful. So it's been a beautiful partnership that I don't know if we would have been able to foster or even realize that like that's what it's about had it not been for this project from SDOT and OPCD. It just shows that it takes many different perspectives to really move a community. And I know, because I see these elders all the time, that series of workshops really just built a lot of enthusiasm and hope in our elders. And in our young people, I think it's really just seeing what is possible. A lot of the stuff KCSKC has done with our young people and our elders has never been done before for our community. And so the fact that we can do that while also contributing to our city is such an honor. And really, really grateful to Janie and Kim. The elders love them. They cannot wait to see you all again. And it's just, it feeds everybody. It's nourishing everyone. And I know the staff that we worked with in the city have also really enjoyed the project too. So I think it's just testament to the relationships. Yeah.
Next slide. I think we're done. Yeah, we're done. We just shout out to Aja and Lizzie. So Lizzie's from SDOT and Aja's from OPCD. Yeah. They were the main city staff that were working with all the community-based organizations on this project. And they really went out of their way to like try to make this as accessible as possible. Mm-hmm. If you've ever been through a city contracting process as a small community-based organization, there are a lot of barriers. And so they really went out of their way to try and make it work for KCSKC in terms of, we still have ridiculous accounting spreadsheets, but it was probably less onerous than it would have been otherwise. So yeah. So we have I think we have 5 minutes for questions. But yeah, you can stop sharing now.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for this very in-depth presentation. You clearly have a ton of passion and a ton of excitement and energy for the work that you've done. I'm sure we have loads of questions for you, so I'm going to dive right into calling on the queue. We're going to start with questions before we move into comments. And feel free to pass if you're not ready, and I'll circle back at the end. Lauren, you're first up. Lauren, are you, maybe I will move on to is Dalton here?
Dalton is here.
Yeah, so I guess, and my apologies if you mentioned transportation, but I guess how to go about garnering like the people that were going to be chosen for the walk at the beginning, like the elders walk. I guess what was the recruitment process and
that's a Stephanie question. Did you hear that?
Was the question how were the elders chosen?
And how did we recruit them?
Oh, okay, got it.
I know
Yeah,
that was tricky. It was political.
So
Socially.
socially political. So KCSKC has a Khmer Senior Village that we established during COVID. And this is a roster of 100 elders who live alone or live in multi-generational households or with just their spouse who qualify under certain things with King County's Veteran Seniors Health Services Levy. So how we chose those, these elders are some of the most active. It's called a village because in order to qualify for the fun things, they also have to contribute back to the community. So most of these elders have helped out with food distributions and vaccine clinics during COVID. They also are ones that need a little bit more assistance from us, whether that's transportation or with food assistance. And then they also have just been more open about their situation and telling us more about their like experience as a community member. So this was definitely over 2 years during COVID of building those relationships back and forth, and these were some of the most active elders and the ones seeking support.
And what we did for the field trips was after the first one, the word got around that these were really fun, and then it became the elder team staff wanted to have other people have access to these opportunities while still trying to maintain like a core of folks. So there was kind of a core group that got to do almost all of them. And then they were a handful that kind of cycled in and out so that more elders got to experience it. Because I think the first one, people were cautious because they were like, we don't know what this is. Like, I don't know about this. And then after that first one, I think one person was like, I'm not going to go, like literally the morning of. They were like, I don't think I'm going to do this. And after that first one, it just like, word got out and the elders were like, we want to go. When do we get to go? When do I get to get on a field trip? But it's really, I think Stephanie said this earlier, it really like has now snowballed to like a whole full-blown elder field trip program where they're now going. I heard y'all went to the tulip farm the other day, like did all kinds of really great things, and it's been really helpful, especially in terms of mental health. A lot of elders commented on just like being stuck at home and feeling really isolated and experiencing depression, and then getting to be in community and feel valued, and them saying that, you are actually asking for my opinion like it matters and that I still have relevance. I still have something to offer the world and I'm not just like an old retired person, right? So it's been really meaningful for a lot of elders.
Yes, it's me then.
Yeah, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm assuming you had to kind of come up with this program and this approach from scratch. Like you had to decide who are we going to engage and how.
Yep.
And I'm wondering just like kind of what kind of guidance you got about that, or if you happen to know what they've done in other communities. And this seems like a particularly imaginative and creative way to do it. I'm just wondering, they getting this level of quality out of the other groups, and do you know anything about how?
I can't speak to the other groups because I don't know how they approached it, but this was a lot of this was birthed out of the last comprehensive plan update. When I was working at Interim Community Development Association, I ran something very similar for our elders in the CID and with our youth to like, how do you make the comp plan something accessible? And so when this came out, I approached Stephanie and said, like, I know your community is really interested in being more engaged in this stuff, and like, here's this opportunity. And if you want to do this, like, I have like a way that we've approached this before that was also an immigrant community, also a lot of refugees, also limited English speaking, also youth and elders that we can apply to this. And then Kim and I and Stephanie, the three of us spent a lot of time thinking through like, how would we actually structure that?
The development of the curriculum. Yeah. we often started with like just a baseline understanding of how people were familiar with the experience we were going to, like any questions they had in advance, and then talk them through what we were going to do, and then we would experience it, and then we would have a conversation afterwards. That was sort of the general structure of our.
So is OPCD collecting any of this wisdom for other engagement or SDOT? Do you know?
Yeah. What?
That's a concept.
We, yes, I believe Aja and Lizzie, that is a goal of theirs. And we, for this project, produced a big report. How many pages do we
Oh my
have?
gosh,
Like 40 some pages. That's more expanded than what you saw. It goes into a lot more detail. And that we gave to the city, and they're gonna post it, I think, online later, along with all the other reports from all the other community organizations. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing too?
Yeah, go for it.
I also think this is where what I was talking about of like it's about the relationship between community-based orgs and the government, in that when a CBO like KCSKC is trusted to know what's meaningful to our community and trusted to be flexible with the funds and spend them how we understand will be most meaningful and impactful for our community. I think that kind of liberation allows for this kind of creative idea to come forth. And that it's less about like I am hopeful that other communities will learn about what we did, and be inspired to do something in their own community with their own twists, their own cultural aspects. And I think that a lot of communities have these ideas already and just need the green light and the funding to do so.
Yes.
I think that's why having Lizzie and Aja be so checking in with us and being so understanding and being willing to hear the whole fleshed out idea was really helpful for us to be successful, because community work is like very unpredictable sometimes, all over the place. And I know that doesn't jive well necessarily all the time with our government from my experience working for parks. So just knowing I had the support institutionally allowed our elder team to really dream about what this could look like. And I think that was one of the biggest contributing factors to this actually manifesting.
Yeah, none of the city staff said you have to do this, or you have to do a public meeting, or you have to do, they were like, here's the funds, here's what we're hoping to get out of it. You dream how you might make this happen and the best way for that to happen with your community. And I think that approach is something that would be phenomenal if like more city departments adopted that.
All right. Well, I really hate to say this, but we are out of time. Before we say goodbye, again, I just want to express on behalf of the whole commission our sincere appreciation for you all. Oh, sorry, Julio. I thought maybe you could see the chat box.
Okay.
Vanessa was asking if you, Rose and Rick, if you wanted to send your questions over email, she will follow up with them, and facilitate feedback that way.
We'll keep you some time next week and waiting.
Just mindful.
Okay, I'm sorry, Julio. Again, just appreciate you all spending your time with us this afternoon. We know that you have get pulled in a lot of directions and have a lot of other places that you could be right now, and spending time with us sort of demonstrating the value of investments in community engaged planning and design. It was really powerful. So thank you so much. And if you can't see the chat box, there's folks along the way who have also seconded that and expressed their appreciation as well. Okay. Well, thank you. With that, we will move on to our next agenda item. So this is an opportunity for us to meet a new staff person with the Office of Planning and Community Development. Tim, thank you for joining us today. This is Tim Lehman, and I don't know what your title is, but you can tell us. But before we get started, since you missed the round of introductions in the beginning, just want to go around and do a quick round, starting with commissioners. So Tim knows who he's talking to. I can kick things off. Hi, Tim. I'm co-chair of the Seattle Planning Commission. My name's Michaela Daffern. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I will pass it to Deanna.
Hi, I'm Deanna Quintanar. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and I'm a multimodal transportation planner at WSP. I'll pass it over to David.
Hey, I'm David Goldberg.
Oops. I don't need to unmute myself when I'm in this room. It's a habit. Now I'm going to go back to my office and do the opposite. David Goldberg, he, him pronouns. I'm the other co-chair of the Planning Commission. I live in Wallingford Urban Village and work for the State Department of Transportation. Pass it to Lauren.
Hey, Tim, excited to meet you. Lauren Squires, she, her, Mount Baker, and I'm a transportation planner. Dalton.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Dalton Owens. I live in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle. Pronouns he, him, and I am a project engineer for a construction company. And I'll pass it over to Rose.
Hey, Rose Lucello Woodson, pronouns they, them. I live up north in Licton Springs, and I work as a wetland biologist and permitting specialist with Jacobs Engineering. Kayla?
Hi, my name is Caleb Twilde, he, him pronouns. I live in Columbia City and I work in education. And I pass it to Julio.
Julio unfortunately had to leave. Jamie.
I'm Jamie Strobel. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the future 130th station area, and I work in climate change and environmental justice. And I will pass to Rose. Oh, sorry, Rose, just like, it's the afternoon, y'all, sorry. I'll pass to Rick.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, Tim. Rick Moeller, use he, him pronouns, live between Wallingford and Green Lake. I'm an architect and I teach at the UW.
Olivia.
Hey, Tim, it's Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the commission. Oh, John.
Hey, Tim, it's John Hoy, staff to the Planning Commission. I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining us. Vanessa Murdoch, staff to the commission. I use she, her pronouns, and thank you for taking the time. We are very excited to hear from you and get to talk to you and meet you virtually.
For sure. Is it my turn?
Yes.
Yeah, how are y'all doing today? Yeah, Tim Lehman. I'm the Indigenous planning strategist, as it says on the screen here. My background is in planning and landscape architecture. I've been involved in Indigenous community for probably 20 years now. Grew up in Washington, Northern Arapaho, Wind River Reservation, but I was born and raised in Montana. But been out here since elementary school for the most part, and I'm from Mount Lake Terrace. I currently live in Lake City. Kind of recent past, I was a consultant to a good amount of firms out here for design firms, that is. I currently teach at the University of Washington. It's my last quarter. I teach for the landscape architecture department in kind of this idea of cultural reclamation and what that actually means. I've been involved with the city for a handful of years now, doing contracts and advising kind of on Indigenous engagement and RET stuff. Yeah, I work on it for the city, right? So yeah, it's nice. Thank you for inviting me today. I don't have much in terms of anything to present to you because this job's still so recent. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Kind of give you currently what I'm working on. Of course, all attention right now is on comp plan. I'm just trying to hold folks accountable and do the stuff folks said that they were going to do. Well, it's kind of been my role in general for a good long while now. A lot of people like to speak on things, but nothing ever usually follows through, especially with the Indigenous community. And so now I'm here to help push a lot of that stuff forward. Kind of other relevant areas are really just trying to show where Indigenous community actually exists within the city, what that actually means, who's point of contact, so we can get a lot more collaboration going, and not just with Indigenous community, but with other Seattle, City of Seattle groups. Not a lot of collaboration from what I can see, just in general, especially in regards to indigeneity. So making sure that that happens. Culturally modified trees is a really big topic right now. Just to give the short of that, what that actually means, right, folks. And it doesn't apply to trees, it applies to a lot of other stuff as well. But trees, think of a cedar and someone wanting to strip the bark of that tree to use for cultural purposes. People are interested in mapping these. There is a local tribe that has mapped them, has collaborated with other local tribes and gotten their locations, and want to now start putting these trees under protections. The other thing with culturally modified trees are that there are remains under some trees, and we want to keep those as private as possible. But again, it's a slippery slope, whichever way you want to walk down it. But there's interest in getting these things under protections and what that actually means. So that is on the back burner right now. Again, precedent is comp plan. That's first things first right now, that we have a new deadline and I can actually get some things in it. Other relevant things would be, completing a GIS map that is interactive in a way that folks know what services are available and where within the city. I'm probably missing a couple other things, but that's about it. This is my second month on the job, I think, 8 weeks in.
All right, Tim. Yeah, you don't know, you need another year before you really know what your job is. So we really, I feel for you being asked to come and talk to us today with not a lot of content, or don't worry, we're very appreciative to have you here and have an opportunity to talk with you. Do you want to open up the floor for questions now, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely.
You ready for that? Okay. I'm gonna ask, like, go to my list. I've got a list or an order that we're gonna follow. And I'm gonna call Jamie and then Rose and then Deanna.
Yeah. Tim, I'm so excited you're here. 2 months on the job. Like, we've been talking with OPCD about, this work for years, and it's just so exciting to see this like be a role and to have someone in it and to have you in it. So my question is, I just kind of like, you're only a few months in, what are some things that you are thinking about and like some hopes and dreams for the role that you're in? And kind of what you want to get out of it too, and how we can support you, but that might be something you don't know yet. So maybe focus on the first two questions.
Yeah. Even all of that. I'm still gauging on what it is that can be done in my position. For one, again, really my main goal right now is following through with what folks have already told others that was going to happen to particular folk, council members, mayor, right, within OPCD, and then now trying to do that job. It was like promises were made, but then there was no one there to do it. And now I'm here to do it, but I have a short amount of time to do it. So I haven't given thought to any of that yet, honestly. First focus, foremost, is comp plan. to be honest with y'all, I'm very transparent. There is no word of Indigenous or indigeneity within this current draft. And so it is my job to make sure now that that is pushed forward in terms of getting language put into it, whether it is just narrative or policy. And it was very disappointing to know, I've been a part of this work for a long time. The previous comp plan had only 5 mentions of Indigenous regarding Indigenous people in it, right? It is not enough. And so a lot of this is really, there's a lot of groundwork that's been there. There's, if you don't know, there's been an Indigenous intern now for the last 3-4 years. I helped implement that program with Robert Scully way back when, and I've been mentoring it now since I've gotten this job. Dakota has been a hire, but Dakota Murray's been a hire from that position, which is great. And now I'm able to take all of that intern work and put it to good use. So we have folks that looked at comp plan, and we've had other folks that done community engagement. And now I'm just taking all those ideas and words and dropping it in places that it can go.
Well, we're thrilled that you're here. And I'm also glad that the timing works out that you get to squeeze some things into that comp plan.
Rose.
Yes, I was typing my question because sometimes I need to see it to read it. But so thanks for joining us. I was wondering if you'd be able to elaborate on promises made, just because I'm not sure we as the commission know what promises were made with regard to including Indigenous perspectives and how the comprehensive plan should change. And I'm wondering if there's maybe a way that we can help support by asking questions or adding that accountability lens that you're looking for, if that would be appropriate.
No, not necessarily. In regards to public knowledge is that there is supposed to be an Indigenous element to the comp plan, and there's not, right? Because no one did any of the work on it. So I'm trying to move away from the idea of an Indigenous element anyways. I don't want indigeneity put into a box and then someone look at it to when they want to look at a land acknowledgement or something. I want the language to be woven throughout the document and lessons learned on why it's there. Like why is it that say there's a part in housing explaining the need for different zoning to help Indigenous folk live the way they want to live, which would be multi-generational housing. And in that multi-generationality idea of what housing is would be more of a compound view or living a living space. But again, there's no current policy in explaining that or encouraging that type of architecture for Indigenous folk, right? So I'm trying to break things down, not only just to provide the need for the community itself, but provide a lesson for everybody that is involved with it. So the one thing that has been said is that there was going to be Indigenous element. I'm somewhat against that. Again, reasons I just explained, but we can have that and more. I think I want more than just the element. I want lessons behind it all as well. Like, you know, an acknowledgement is not enough, right? And a land acknowledgement is just a land acknowledgement. If you're not going to do anything about it, don't include the acknowledgement at all, right? That is my way of thinking towards what that actually means. And folks within the city need to understand that too, right? So we're like, hey, we want to hire someone for a land acknowledgement. Well, know what that whole process means and what that means for the community, right? So it's this things that have been said, but things that are going to be said in the future of so folks understand what it is they're actually saying or asking for from the community.
Thanks for sharing that. lot to
Yeah, absolutely.
digest.
Deanna.
Thank you. Hi, Tim. Great to meet you. Thanks for being with us. I'm curious what, the comprehensive plan is intended to have a vision for outcomes in 20 years. What are the measurable outcomes we as a commission should be embracing and looking out for in terms of, I'm hearing, there's a goal to incorporate the language and making sure that it's woven in. It's not just this element or box, it's woven in. But then that needs to translate to meaningful improvement in the experience of Indigenous people and how land use and urban form and the things we're saying we need to achieve as a community actually have tangible benefits in the quality of life of Indigenous communities. How can we measure that? What are ways in which we can create that accountability through the comp plan, through targets? Or I'm not sure exactly what that could look like, and I'm wondering if you have an idea of what that could look like.
Oh goodness, yeah, that in itself is like a whole conversation, right? I always just look at things that are actionable, like what, but then what's the metric to measure that, right? And so for me, one would be how the way things are currently is housing, like house ownership, right? The number of that, how can that increase? How can we encourage that? Where do these folks fit in within that and what that actually means? And then on the broader scale of that, land ownership, right? For these community-based programs and what that actually means. Oh, that's the other big thing that I missed, I did not talk about, right? Is the thing that I've been working on personally and with my, I don't know if you're familiar, but we have a consultant group called Rising Tides that does a lot of work with the planning office or whatnot. But we've been working on the idea of a native neighborhood and what that actually means, or even like a native cultural district, which does not exist within the city of Seattle either. And being able to provide services for urban natives versus what you would imagine like Makchu Puyallup or Tulalip, right? But also for those same folk as well, because I think there's a good amount of population. I don't have the number on the top of my head, but we have a native neighborhood study that is actually almost a completion that I'll be able to share with all of you to see what that actually looks like. That provides numbers, provides language of what that means to push it forward. So some really good idea from that. But and what's coming out of that, of course, again, is house ownership, land ownership, and community space. But also this kind of like land back type of movement that's been going on currently. But the idea of that how are we able to not just lease space for 100 years, but actually own it, right? And what that actually means. So I think those are very tangible things we can measure in 20 years. Heck, in 5, 10, then 20, if we want to see if that progression of that actually is working, or if people are on board with that even. I think other things would be the amount of involvement from Indigenous community, not just in regards to like comp plan, but other projects as well, and what that actually engagement means and is. We've just created, I say we, Tahoma Peaks is a consultant group, has just completed an Indigenous engagement plan on what that actually looks like, steps and processes of how to engage with Indigenous community as a member of the city of Seattle or a contractor through the city of Seattle. So just more involvement in general. And then I think another big one would just be, again, overall intent of our words, right? The land acknowledgement is just a land acknowledgement, but without action, it's nothing. So a good start is, say, just that renaming of the waterfront street right there is great. But again, the sign is spelled wrong, right? It's capitalized. There's no subscript to actually pronounce the word correctly. So it's a step, but let's make it more of a step in the right direction, but let's make it complete by redoing the sign and paying respect to it rather than disrespecting what that actually means in that whole process is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah. And we really look forward to hearing and hopefully hearing from you when the study is ready, the neighborhood study.
Absolutely. Language is there. They want to format it. I'll make sure that you all get a part of it. And you know, I'm looking so excited for the future of just collaborating with you all and you all letting me know where I can fit in with kind of the agenda of this fantastic group as well.
Thank you.
Consider us allies and extensions of your work. You have a tremendous body of work ahead of you and a lot of expectations on your shoulders, and you can't do it alone. So when you think that we can be helpful and supportive and lifting up and pushing forward any of those things that you're working on, I think that's a consistent sort of offer that we try and offer folks, but I see that you might need it more than some of the other well-resourced teams.
Well,
sorry,
I'm
not doing a good job.
Definitely on my own, and no, I'm not on my own. However, sometimes it feels like it, but I'm joking. Yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am. You'll see this face once. You're going to see a whole bunch more times because I'm really good in following up and just checking in, right? But also vice versa, like following up with stuff, just really good at communication. And that's kind of where I fell into my professional work anyways. I became more of a liaison and project manager within landscape architecture and urban planning. And I was just able to get stuff done, right? I have a good knack for that and understanding of who the key players should be and who they are and how to all get them engaged with each other. And I think that's definitely an area of why I'm here, because I'm definitely well connected within the local community and wider than that. I sit on the board of ILYI, if you all don't know, which is the all women-led nonprofit that just provides funds for a variety of Indigenous-led projects within the city and Oregon, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and beyond. So I have a really good experience with that and what collaboration actually means to get things done elsewhere as well. And you all are a very valuable resource to me, knowing all your vast experience and backgrounds. But we're all kind of experienced in doing the same thing, which is working with these super complex issues in regards to urban design and fabric and culture and what that actually means. So I was super excited when I got the invite to be able to come and talk to y'all, and I appreciate that.
Great. All right. So Lauren, you're up next. I don't know if we have Lauren. Rick?
Sure. Thanks, Michaela. Thank you, Tim, for joining us. We are excited that you accepted our invitation. And I hope to cross paths out at the UW. My colleagues have already asked several of the questions that I had. And one which you might not yet have an answer to, but I know that you're new, but sometimes being new is a good thing. It means you do not yet know what can be done. And so, we are often trying to hold the city accountable to things it's said it would do. And I'm wondering if you've had any positive experiences or tips or strategies that you've employed that you found to be successful yet.
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, is just being transparent and upfront and not passive with things, right? Making sure I understand someone's intent and that they absolutely know my intent and what that actually means. And so just being upfront with folks and letting them know my actual my agenda to things and how that is really helps. And then of course not letting things slide. If I hear that someone said that they were going to do something, being able to follow through with them, and again, just like you all, hold them accountable for what they said they were going to do. And then if they don't have capacity for it, finding out where I can fit in to help them out, push that forward. It's been a lot of meetings. Been a lot of meetings for the first 2 months of just like finding out who's where, who's doing what, who's collaborating, who are collaborators, who are folks that are just kind of existing within the city. You know what I mean? Like, it's really trying to find allies in that sense of being able to accomplish things. And I think I found a good amount of folks that can do that and help me accomplish what I want to achieve too, which is just making the city more inclusive to urban Indigenous folk.
Great. Thanks. It's been said, but I'll say it again. Please count us among your allies.
Absolutely, 100%.
Do we have any more questions from folks before we move on to discussion?
All passes. Never mind.
Vanessa, how do we
Discussion is-
manage the queue for discussion? Just first come, first serve?
If people want to put their name in the queue, that would be great.
Okay.
It's not the most conversational way to have a conversation, but with people in the room and then people remotely, it's the best way we've found to try and facilitate a conversation, although it can come off a little stilted. So my apologies for that.
No
Open
worries.
to ideas to facilitate better. Why don't you jump in, Michaela?
Yeah, I can kick us off, and I'm sure other people will filter into the chat box. One idea that I heard when I heard you talking a lot, you were surfacing topics around land ownership, housing, intergenerational, a lot of different housing strategies. And I wanted to flag for you some new state level and countywide policies that perhaps could be leveraged in support of some Indigenous goals in the comp plan. Jurisdictions now have to identify the past racially discriminatory housing and land use practices, and then propose policies that begin to repair that harm. And this is in particular specifically around housing stuff. It's in the housing chapter of the countywide planning policies, and it's about the housing element in the Growth Management Act. But I work for the county. We just put out guidance on documenting the history. Our expectation there is that jurisdictions are going to start with their Indigenous history. And there could be some strategies there where Seattle looks at thinking through what is our reparative approach to the Indigenous land and the negative history there. And then one of the things that the county is going to require, my team in particular, is jurisdictions have to submit implementation details relative to certain housing policies that they put in their housing element. And that's an opportunity to make some commitments about steps that the city will take to implement that policy, so it doesn't just become another sort of like broken promise that's not carried through. And I think that could be really powerful for the city to make a pretty firm and clear statement about how they're going to move forward with implementation. It doesn't have to be the full details, but it could be some clear next steps, because at the countywide level, what we'll be doing is actually monitoring annual progress. And then 5 years later, if there are significant shortfalls discovered, then there will be a requirement that the jurisdiction take steps to repair or address the shortfalls. So that to me just seems like some new tools that could be exercised if you were sort of looking for an inroads and sort of how to bolster or justify some strategy or ideas that you already had bubbling. And I just wanted to offer that up as some ideas.
Absolutely. That's all very helpful information. And again, we'll have some precedent to turn to as well in that regard. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm not seeing any other names in the chat box. You guys honestly not have questions or ideas? Deanna, go for it.
If no one else has a question, I don't want to take up space. I already did. But I'm curious, Tim, within your very, very wide agenda, I do think that it'd be very helpful for, folks in, thinking myself as a consultant, right? And what tools are there that could better inform any project that the city is touching to incorporate, this lens and the tools and how to, through the RETs and et cetera, kind of go beyond, what are some guiding questions, some active ways in which many of the projects that are underway, right? We have like a capital improvement program. What is the lens that capital improvement program should have, in any phase of the project, whether it's, you're working mainly on policy, it sounds, but then we have actual projects that are in planning phase, design phase, construction. I think it would be super helpful for, in your role, figure out what are tangible ways in which we can accelerate and catalyze incorporating and testing. And I know that it's going to be kind of a trial and error, and there's going to be some good ideas that then end up being not great ideas when trying to be implemented. But wondering if you are thinking about ways in which to plug in, these goals and these aspirations to enable Indigenous communities at various stages of projects. What does that look like? And have you thought about that? And what are ways in which we could help start thinking about those tools?
Yeah, so the engagement tool will help us out, and it's engaging with Indigenous community from the beginning, not at stages within a project, right? Having that involvement right at the beginning, and what I refer to as a process is an accountability loop, where you engage community, you digest what they tell you, you bring it back to them to what it is you felt you heard, and you get more comments on that, to where you all then come to an understanding. And that might take more than 2 times. It might be 3, 4, 5 times. But you all are coming to an understanding of the work that's actually going to be done and agreed upon by the majority, versus, okay, we checked off a box, we met with, the CID and the Muckleshoot. Now let's just move on without anybody holding you accountable for the work that's being done, right? So that's something that's been discussed for a bit now, and I'm trying to. I'm also sorry. Probably something else I didn't measure. I'm part of the sub area plan work as well, and so I was a contractor for that, and kind of showing what engagement means and showing it through an Indigenous lens, but applying that to all groups for the time being, which is very transparent and has that space where you are involved with community, and it's based on that engagement and that kind of feedback, receiving and taking on both sides. And we feel that kind of reviewing some of the current projects that have been going on, that engagement starts, but it's never followed through. Folks normally don't follow through with it, or it's optimized in a way that is not really telling the whole story of that engagement. And it's because the community wasn't involved later down that process, and we want them more so throughout the entirety of a project.
May I ask a follow-up question on this kind of comment thread? I think one of the things that I'm struggling with is how to review a comprehensive plan and determine if the city has done an adequate job in terms of indigenizing the plan. I don't have are there baseline community conversations or input that has been sought from specific communities that we could look to If there are not those, are there best practices we as commissioners could be evaluating and studying up on before plan review starts, so we are as primed and ready to provide helpful feedback to improve the plan? I'm feeling a little like the city hasn't practiced this accountability feedback loop, in particular on the indigenization of the plan component. And help me out.
There has been work. There has been engagement, but again, my position took a while to fill. Well, not to fill, to actually implement. And so there wasn't that point person that was doing something with all those words. I am here now, and that I am taking everybody's notes that's been involved in the last 4 years in this idea of comp plan, and now I'm trying to synthesize it into more or less a document that explains that where the conversations at, and these are the issues that did arise, and the areas where comp plan was going to fall short no matter what. I mean, I think that was already given the case. But then where then now can this language start to be implemented throughout the elements of the comp plan? I can definitely eventually share with you kind of what I've been synthesizing and collecting, and it's really just more bullets. But I break it down into the elements of the comp plan, and then whether it's narrative or whether it's policy, if that makes sense at all. And then that way you actually have something tangible, and someone who's working on housing elements like, oh, I know right where that can go, and then they can take it and push it forward.
Thank you. Okay, Rose, you're up.
I have a semi-related, but also kind of all over the place question. So teasing on the thread of not necessarily stating what indigeneity is to give it room to grow, but to put stuff in that allows space for indigeneity. Something that I counter a lot, both in my professional and personal life, is the tension between Native people who are not with federally recognized tribes in the area, the tension between federally recognized tribes and Native people who are not associated, like that kind of like, do you have any guidance or suggestions on how to navigate that tension in the comprehensive plan? Because we've been told multiple different things. So, well, in the comp plan, even outside of it, I mean, like there is like the Native experience, the urban Native experience, I'm told, since I am not Native, is varied and vast and, multifaceted.
Absolutely, right. So just comp plan would be spaces to celebrate indigeneity, being Indigenous culture, what that actually means, places to relearn that if it's been lost, right, and what that actually means. And just kind of like every day, right, especially being associated with city or county or a government entity, right, you can only engage with federally recognized tribes that, that have their sovereignty and what that actually means. I've had the privilege of working with Duwamish tribal services and say Muckleshoot Puyallup all at the same time, and have not come up with any issues. For one, being uber transparent on what it is I'm actually doing, right? And not hiding anything from anyone, and giving them it just out in the open, letting them understand what it is I'm actually doing. Duwamish Tribal Services is a community group. They're a 501c, or 501, yeah. They're a nonprofit, right? So the city caters to that as well, but in a different way, and almost probably easier way in a sense, and what that actually means. So it's not, the important thing is understanding that there is that risk and being able to navigate it in a socially acceptable way between both sides. And again, that takes years of experience and what that actually is. Like, I mean, like, for one, yeah. The important thing of what that question is you actually understanding that there is a tension, and not having that ignorance that everything is bliss, right? Because assimilation has won within the Native community and continues to win. It pits everybody against each other. sovereign nations against sovereign nation. Like, and especially out here, it's like brother and sister fighting and like arguing and fighting over things, right? It's because one side went one way and the other one went the other, right? In terms of trying to get their sovereignty and recognition. So it's again, it starts with acknowledging it, but then also understanding it and knowing that that's an issue is so important. But then understanding your role within community to be able to help navigate that, but then also push folks' agenda forward within that scenario, because it's a very prominent one. And again, if you all ever have any questions regarding that, I'm more than welcome to contact me at any time, because again, I'm one of the few folks that have worked for some of these feeding tribes at the exact same time and not them care it one bit. So I have really long and good experience navigating this. I've been yelled at plenty of times, right? And you got to understand that's also a thing, right? Being involved in planning and design and things is what I call and what I teach within the University of Washington is reclamation through the design process of culture, of your culture, learning that you have the words and the say and the power to do what it is you want in your own lives, in your own space, in your own community. And we've lost that as a community because we've always been told. We've never been given the chance to take it on ourselves. And folks have that sovereignty now, and sometimes don't know how to operate that within that Anglo-Western ideology of law and what that is. And so I'm here to help them navigate that, but then also have them reclaim what it is they lost in this whole process of colonialization.
Awesome.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
I'm feeling energized, and I'm very grateful that the city's brought you on, and very much looking forward to it. I think the executive committee, I'm on to talk with Vanessa about maybe bringing you back and kind of what that looks like and how we can create sort of a regular
if you
schedule.
all want me to report or whatnot, like every month or two, you let me know. I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, you've got a lot of work to do, so I don't want to
Sure.
pile on. But
No, not at all. It's fine. This is good because it helps me think out loud too. But then next time I'll have a presentation or something for y'all, or something you all to review beforehand and be able to share some feedback on.
Yeah,
I have a question, just really quick.
Go ahead.
Would it be helpful? I don't know. Has our staff already talked to you about what we do? Like, maybe next time we could give a presentation on what we do to you if you need.
Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
I have
That would be
a
helpful.
question request.
Yeah.
And not for right now, but if there's any reading or viewing that you would recommend that might help us understand some of the issues that we want to be thinking about as a planning commission around these issues and planning for the city, it would be really great. And maybe just refer those to the staff and just maybe as they occur to you. And if not, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it would be interesting to get some more background understanding.
I will definitely have more substance for you in the future in regards to the city. On personal reads or things like that, pick up a Vine Deloria book, any of them. They explain the Indigenous perspective on how we view what he would term as white folk. Custer Died for Your Sins is a very good one. And then there's another one that is on the tip of my tongue. Vine has since gone and passed, but he's very critical on both sides of this, what this relationship is and has been, and it'll give you some good insight on kind of how the relationship is.
Thanks.
And they're great reads. He taught at I want to say Yale or Harvard for a very long time on this idea.
Great.
I
All
actually
right.
bought that book not too long ago if people want to start a book club.
Yeah.
You kind of have some spare time this summer.
Yeah.
Until
Instead
September,
of reading the
that's-
comp plan draft, we're all gonna
Yeah.
read that book.
or the STP or whatever.
All right. Well,
Thank you so much.
yes. Do we have anybody here for public comment, Vanessa?
We do not.
Okay. Is there anything else I'm supposed to do before adjourning the meeting? Nope. All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
With that, I adjourn the meeting at exactly 5:05. All right.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Michaela.
Thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thanks,
I'm
Michaela.
looking
Nice
forward to
knowing you.
reconnecting.